trying to limit that liability the best you can wherever you can. It is smart. I know several offices that have instituted, kind of waiver forms and things like that to try to absolve themselves of any kind of liability. But they're not fun. Everybody thinks that they've got it, or they've watched way too much YouTube or HGTV, and they think they can handle it until they get to, we had one. It was, I think, the third sliding patio door on the walkout basement of this home that they just absolutely had to have. That was completely rotted through. That one put them down to a squat, and the horizontal crack with the bowing and the water seepage in the basement put him on his knees. So it's, they're already overbidding on these things, as you guys know. To get faced with in that particular one, he was probably staring down at least $35,000 in pretty major repairs. The little stuff you can check off and tackle along the way, but some of those bigger ones. So it's really a gut punch. I ran into a realtor the other day at the gas station, and he was saying he hopes to God none of these people call him in 3 years to sell, because that's when they're going to really know what they're in for. So, it's become the norm. There's not much you can do other than, do what you do, be that fiduciary responsibility to your client, and try to counsel them. We'll still come in after the fact and kind of give them a rundown of what they have to do and a real world expectation of what needs to be done and what doesn't. But certainly is one of the bigger trends in the industry to try to make it hot. I think, Mike, I thought I heard you mention, you kind of chuckle when you see some of these extra things. Pretty much everybody's nixing things like radon and all the other ancillary tests. VA inspections are still requiring the pest component, but they're even waiving allowing the inspection portion to be waived, which is odd. For those who don't do a lot of VA loans, that's a relatively new thing in our Quad County area. It started a little over a year ago, being required. And they do, for those who don't know, they do come up, not very often. We usually see more things like carpenter and power post beetle damage than we do termites. But termites are in the area. They're pretty rare. They do come up every once in a while. Other kind of things that are coming with this whole limit of liability we're seeing is the request for re-inspections on stuff. And it usually comes from the bank. Why they want us to come back out, I don't know. We've never really engaged in that. On occasion, we'll come back out and check on something more out of favor than anything else. Because when these repairs are being made, those contractors' receipts and things like that ought to be what takes the precedent, rather than us coming back out to say if it was done or if it wasn't done. But we're starting to see that a little bit from banks, especially on VA loans, where banks are trying to limit their exposure and their costs from sending out their own people. So they're doing what they can to get anybody else to do it. Like I said, that's one you can definitely push back on. It's not required. We don't do them. I don't have the time to put down all that stuff. So it's also something where, and I can kind of touch on this a little bit later too, but we try to do our best. We operate to stay in our lane. So some of those things are start branching out. Anybody have any questions on those post-close inspections, no inspections, anything like that? All right. Other big stuff that's coming in is, I'm sure most of you know, the defect language is kind of coming back around. Don't really know how that's going to play out in the field. I've talked to half a dozen or more other inspectors in there. As far as our legal department, as far as home team operates, our legal department has kind of reviewed our stuff. We fall in line. There's really not a lot of changes that we're going to see, other than maybe a couple of tweaks to the summary to include maintenance items if necessary. But there is a push, and some of you may be seeing it in our side of things, where people, in order to get a lot of these things to kick off, you'll see some inspectors carry all the InterNACHI badges. So your mold check, your recall check, we'll buy your house, your foundation check, all these different things. Those are generated. You can put those on your website. You need to tailor your reports to include specific language, which basically limits the liability of those things, or it limits the frequency of which those things actually need to kick in. And it's because the reports are written in such a way that they have to adopt that language in order to be able to use those things. So my guess is you're going to start to see a lot of inspectors just labeling everything as defective to limit their liability when that comes down the pipe. So I'm hopeful that it doesn't wind up backfiring from its intended goal. But it's a likely scenario for some of these guys to want to be able to continue to use these so-called warranties that don't really ever pay out. But that's one thing that's a little bit yet on the horizon, and remains to be seen how that will play out. So on that note, so what you guys don't see on your side is a big change happened in our industry. The vast majority of home inspectors out there use a back office system called ISN. ISN was recently bought out by Porch and is now a publicly traded company. Porch, if you aren't familiar, is kind of a do-it-all stop. Their goal was to be the go-between from the home inspection process when we leave and close, and then these homeowners are left there with nobody to talk to. The realtor's been paid and is gone. The home inspectors move on to the next thing. They're now in the house and they don't know what to do. Porch is trying to fill that gap to make happy home ownership. When they first started, it was actually a pretty good company. We used to actually use them, and we had a pretty good review rate from customers. Then they started getting more aggressive, and the phone calls came in, and they branched out from what was once, hey, you have a few things on your inspection report, we can fix those for you, to they're doing everything now, from selling homeowners insurance, selling alarm systems, selling contractor services, selling warranties, selling everything. And each division is different. So what once used to be an in-house thing has now spiraled out of control, and everything has been offshored to somebody else. So we started getting complaints and we shut it down pretty rapidly. That is now becoming, Porch found a way to get in, to get a hold of everybody's stuff by acquiring ISN. So they now, because they own ISN, they have access to everybody's reports. That in essence is going to change that landscape a little bit. Now there are some agencies out there that fully and wholeheartedly have adopted Porch. They're actually integrating it into their technology systems to make that a thing. And there are good components of it. But just be aware that that is something that is going to start to take a more front and center approach. What does it mean for you and your business? It means that those small little relationships that you may or may not have had with outside contractors will get squeezed. So if you had your own, handyman guy, or you had your own siding guy, or your roof guy, or that kind of thing, if they're not part of that Porch network, then they might want to, because that's going to wind up becoming a go-to stop for a lot of these people. We opted to not do that. Again, we try to stay in our lane. We just give a fair and unbiased inspection, and we exit the stage. We don't get into selling products. We don't get into selling warranties. We don't push alarm systems. That's for you guys to do. You guys have those different relationships. So if you want to handle those with your client, we completely remove ourselves from that equation and just kind of stick to what we do. So that's a pretty big change that's going to be coming down. And like I said, the vast majority of home inspection companies across the country use that ISN platform. And so if they weren't integrated with the Porch system, they likely will be very soon. It's an elective process, so you can opt out of it, but most will probably engage in it because Porch pays them to do that. So
I have a question, Ian. Sure. So if that program was adopted, are those contractors that, so now we need somebody to come out and look at a roof, and our buyers might call 5 people, before they actually get one to come out. Is there going to be like a guarantee that you call them and these contractors that are in this program, and they will actually follow up and do the work, or come out and give the estimate?
It's a little bit different how it works. So it basically, what Porch did is they took and refined your Angie's List and Home Advisor. So they kind of took all the complaints that were with those two organizations. They eliminated the vast majority of that, and they kind of retooled it to try to fit more so for the person. So it's an elective thing. So if the person says, hey, I need a roofing contractor, they'll send them a few different names, and then that'll put them in touch with those people. If you're a contractor affiliated with the Porch program, that's on you to go out there and do that. There's no real, there's no kind of price lock or any real guarantees of anything on Porch's side. They're literally just a middleman. They introduce that client or that homeowner to a particular service or contractor. So after that, they're done. Now they get their fee, obviously, by a chunk of that business that that contractor performs. And those fees have to be somewhat in line or at least averaged. One of the products that Porch has is it will take the inspection report and it will itemize in there. They have their people go through it. It's usually about a 2-day process, and they'll itemize those different repair things that came up in the inspection report, and they'll give a cost basis. And it's a huge ballpark, but they claim that they have prior people who have been in those fields giving those estimates. So in other words, they'll have a former electrician who's on their staff will say, okay, for replacing an outlet, I used to charge $75, or whatever the case may be. It can be alarming when your client gets it. Quite honestly, very few realtors actually use that product, because one of the downfalls of the product is at the end of it all, they put up the great big price tag of everything that was on there. So it's not just a little itemized thing. So, when somebody's buying a house, all of a sudden they see, oh, there's $18,000 worth of suggested repairs. And it really causes a lot of fear with those people. So, but that type of product or service, so all those different components, the clients can say, I'd like an electrician, and they'll send them 2 or 3 names of an electrician who will then bid on those very specific jobs that were in that inspection report. From there, that client is free to form their own relationship, whether it's an HVAC guy for annual service or a roof guy just for routine checkups and things like that. So it's more just a middleman thing than any kind of sort of guarantee that somebody's going to come out.
So they itemize everything that comes up on the inspection? Every item?
Report, yep. So
That
even
sounds
the
like a
stuff,
nightmare.
it can be, and there's no real control over that on the inspector's side. There's a lot of stuff that, and we can touch on that a little bit later, that makes an inspection report that is there for certain reasons, but isn't necessarily a defect. And those things will pop up in that report too. So like I said, it can be alarming. Some people like it because they feel like it makes the negotiation phase a little easier. I bet those people are not saying the same thing or have the same attitudes in today's market. So there's not much for negotiation in today's market. So,
Ian, will we see, as this evolves and the companies that are using this platform have Porch integrated, will we see this become an automatic thing that's part of a report as far as a full itemized assessment, or is that something that the buyer would need to elect to have that kind of separate portion of that report?
It's a little bit of both. So it is buyer elective. It's an add-on fee. I am aware of at least one real estate agency, not office, but the actual agency that is looking to adopt this and incorporate the whole report as part of every single inspection. So there are people who find value to it. Whether or not that is still going to be individually selected at the realtor level remains to be seen with that agency. And I'm not entirely sure, so I don't want to put their name out. I'm not entirely sure that they have followed all the way through on that contractual agreement with Porch to have that included. So at this point, it is elective.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on that? So the name of that product is actually Porch Home Assistant Gold, I believe is the full term. And it's usually an add-on that's kind of sold by a lot of inspection companies out there because they do get paid for it. They get paid by Porch for that lead. So you'll see people pushing that product because they make money on the lead, and then typically how that works is they'll get some fees on the back end waived through the ISN program, which, like I said, is the back office. It's kind of it's a scheduling software, calendar, report distribution, email function, text reminders, all that kind of stuff is also wrapped up in that one program. So it was, I have to admit, it's a pretty good acquisition on Porch's end, but in any event, so that's new coming down on. I think that transaction just closed in the last quarter, and not, like I said, now they're actually publicly traded. So they are going to be flush with cash for all kinds of new adventures. So we'll see what happens in that front. Other than that, any other questions on that at all? Porch or where that's going? Okay. Like Jared touched on, some of the things that keep coming up, and for those of you, a lot of you are probably familiar with some of these different code changes. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is chimneys. Why does my guy want to rebuild my chimney for $3,800 when all it has is a little bit of cracked mortar? I bet I get that call once a week. It's because if you send a licensed chimney guy up there, he's going to have to bring it up to the recent code changes. And with that is a whole ball of wax that starts to get kind of out of hand. You can have just a little bit of cracked or missing mortar. Any handyman can get up there and repoint that. If a chimney guy gets up there, he's going to need to rebuild the crown more than likely because codes changed with crowns. And now they need to have this drip edge and they have to overhang at a certain rate. And, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the sleeving of chimneys. So all these things, none of these things are truly necessary, but oftentimes they'll get flagged and as almost like a required repair in an inspection report. We do make notes for that, but we also try to counsel the buyers to what their option actually is. So take the sleeving of the chimney, for example. It's not a requirement that it be sleeved. It is currently, if you go forward and do some sort of modification or change, you want to put a new water heater in and you're still utilizing the chimney or something like that, it's supposed to be sleeved. The cost to sleeve a chimney is far greater than the cost of a direct vent water heater, which can just port to the exterior and you no longer need to sleeve that chimney. So there are other options to the clients. A chimney guy will never tell the client that because a chimney guy makes money sleeving chimneys. A plumbing contractor will tell the client that. And so we sort of step in there in the middle and make that known. Like if you're still using these older mechanicals and your furnace is 18 or 19 years old, and you're being told you need to have a chimney sleeved, you don't. Wait 2 years or whenever the furnace decides to die and do a high efficiency unit, and then you won't need to do that any longer. So some of those things may come up, but for you guys, especially for on the listing agent side, you don't have to do those things. It's not a requirement. People will push back because everybody hears this horror story about how their parent, mom or dad, had to put in a sleeve in the chimney and it cost them almost $2,000. And it's true, but those aren't necessary things unless you make changes to that particular structure or system. In other words, a chimney. Now, if it's falling apart and they need to rebuild it, then that's a different story. But for minor repairs like cracks and crowns or a little bit of repointing or things like that, or installing a rain cap, a simple handyman can do that without triggering any of those required code issues and changes. And the same can be said too for electric. That's probably the other big one that's coming down now, where the National Electric Code in 2017 had some pretty major updates to it. And then again in 2019, they tweaked some of that language further. I truly believe that the electricians have the strongest lobby in the nation because most of their changes are the most expensive. The latest being the AFCI breaker requirements. Those guys are about $75 a breaker, and that's if you buy them at the store, not having an electrician put them in. So again, it's one of those things that some of those things get called out. You're all familiar with the GFCI outlet language and that kind of thing. I'm assuming at this point. Again, not required that homes have them, Homeowners don't have to keep their homes up to code over the years, nor do they have to in a real estate transaction. Some of those things, though, were required by ASHI standards or state standards, which adopts ASHI standards, that we have to at least point them out. From there, whether it's truly defective or not, I would argue it sort of falls more under a discretionary improvement rather than a required repair. But those things still wind up having to get noted. In the case of the most recent changes, some of them are very life useful things that if you wanted to try to push for them, you can. Things like having an outlet in each vehicle bay of the garage. I can tell you, I just did a brand new construction last week, brand new. Still has no yard, still has some of the stuff taped to the windows. It didn't even follow the 2017 electric code. So there was one outlet in a 3-car garage, and it had no AFCI breakers. So even electricians aren't necessarily following some of these things. That one certainly should have been, and I imagine that building contractor is probably going to go with somebody else now for his homes. But these are things that we're starting to see come back to us on questions, because there's other inspection companies that are coming through and people are moving homes. So, these things get flagged and then people call up and say, hey, is this real? I'm reading through, I just had, my client this or that, and they're being told that this needs to be done. Is that required? And it's not. If something is being worked on in that area, then it would be required. The flip side would be, like I said, for these people who watched way too much HGTV, who decide that they're going to finish their own basement, and they don't do some of those things. Well, then that would be, if you know anybody who's doing that, make sure they do a good job of hiding the code on the back of the drywall, because that's a dead giveaway. If the code on the back of the drywall says that it was done in 2020, those should have AFCI breakers on all those outlets, at least to the panel. So different codes, different changes. Some of those impact you guys on one end and not on others. Again, right now, there's not much for people who are asking for a whole lot to be done, because they just want to be that one that gets to keep their accepted offer. And they don't want to rock the boat. But some of those things, certainly on the listing side, you guys can push back on. If you're more on the buyer's agent side, I would say you can always ask for whatever you want. Chances are they'll tell you to buzz off and they'll go with the next guy. But and the same can be said for plumbing too. Some of those plumbing changes have changed. The vast majority of these new buyers are moving into these older ranches in the 60s and 70s that are still using galvanized pipes, things like drum traps, 90-degree bends, things like that. And then they want to go and put in a new bathroom, and they call in the plumber, and the plumber says, well, your inspector should have told you that this was all old pipes. I can't have a 90-degree bend anymore, and I need to redo the whole plumbing line. Those are the kind of things that we get. I chalk that up to buyers just not being aware of what a home inspection is. While we may cite codes, it is not a code inspection. There's nothing wrong with old codes. There's nothing wrong with old plumbing, other than it's old, and old isn't effective. So some of those things do come into play. Like I said, as listing agent side, those are not required repairs. On a buyer's agent side, kindly just, I would recommend caution your clients into what they're getting into, that, or just at least prepare them for what that means in terms of you're buying an old house, it's used, it's going to make creaks, it's going to make groans, pipes are going to rattle, all those different things. It's like buying a used car. It's not going to glide down the road as smooth as a new one. So any questions on that kind of stuff, code things and all that kind of fun, boring stuff?
Ian, I got a question.
Yeah.
I've been at over 100 home inspections. So whenever I see something or hear something new, I always like, oh, interesting. So there's no such thing, correct me, I believe an electrical plug outlet, there's no such thing as upside down or upside right. I mean, there's customarily the ground is on the bottom, but so I was at an inspection and it was a rec room and all the plugs were what is customarily upside down, I guess, so you
Sure.
round up. And the buyer is like, why is that? Is that a concern? And so I guess I'll tell you what my inspector said and tell me what you would say to a buyer, I guess. If you're looking at them and, they're grounded right, everything's right. They're, they're ground fault protected and all, but they're just all upside down.
Sure. They're probably Leviton. which is a French company. In Europe, they do it the other way. If you actually read the instruction manual on a Leviton outlet, they'll tell you to actually mount it that way.
So
There's no right
Yeah.
or wrong way, really. Europeans believe that the ground plug should be up at the top because it creates less risk. So they invert theirs.
yeah, that's exactly what he said. He said there's no such thing as an upside down outlet because there's no such thing as a right way or upside. Because on the backsplashes, we always see them sideways all the time, in kitchens.
Yeah, and that's really all it is that Leviton will that's actually in their installation manual. They'll tell you to mount it with the ground plug
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
He also, the inspector said, if you're ever in an emergency room or in hospitals, you'll see the plugs are all upside down because of the fall hazards and the carts that fall over.
Yep.
It always going to strike the plug from above, and they want it to hit the ground first, not the. So he said that's that's something I never heard. Look in the emergency rooms or the operating rooms where it's kind of chaotic. They always many times you'll find them upside down in hospitals.
Yeah, Europeans believe that's the safer method, so they put it.
Sounds like it's the safest way. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, any other questions on that kind of stuff? No. Okay. I don't know how we're doing. So, kind of getting back to some of that stuff. What makes the report and why? Like I said, there's ASHI standards. Wisconsin adopts those. Some people have issue with some of those ASHI standards. Some people think they're too strict. Some people think they're not. They don't cover enough. But that's basically it. That's the standard. People in the industry go way above and beyond that. We do as well with certain things, and you can usually chalk that up to a liability thing. A lot of that will come into play with different contractors. So like I said, some of those code things and stuff like that, where, contractors, the first person who gets thrown under the bus is us as inspectors. And then the second person is you guys as realtors. And it usually says, I can't believe your inspector didn't tell you this. He should have caught that. And then I can't believe that your realtor wouldn't have informed you of this. That's usually what we get on the phone calls. And like I said, those code things, that plumber has to change that 90-degree bend or eliminate the drum trap and things like that. Those are all discretionary things. Those aren't required. And while we do point out different things like galvanized pipes and stuff like that, some of that stuff makes the report just for the simple fact that their insurance companies oftentimes want to see it, and it points it out for them. So interesting little side note, one of the nation's top legal people in the home inspection industry, Joe Denler, he's our legal department's kind of, he doesn't work for us, but he's a liaison. He helps write our contracts. He speaks at our events and things like that. So he defends home inspectors and actually helps clients who sue bad inspectors all across the country as an expert witness. The average American reads at a 12-year-old level. So when sometimes you guys look at these reports and you say, why the heck do they put this stupid fluff in here? Or why isn't this? It's because people are dumb today. They really are. And a lot of these people who are buying houses today really shouldn't be buying houses. I mean, no joke, just last week, she didn't know what a furnace was, had no clue. It was as if we were speaking a different language. They don't know what caulk is. They don't know different terminology. And some of that is because it's in different areas of the country. And it's not just your, younger millennial new buyers. It's your older affluent people. We were called back out to a house and this was $1 million house. And she was so mad because she was so embarrassed that their house, something in their basement was making noise when they had a party. And she just had no idea and we must have missed something. And it was her sump pump. She came from an area down south where they don't have basements. They don't have sump pumps. She didn't bother to read the report and see what that is or what the function of it does, and that they should test it on a periodic basis, So it really runs the spectrum, but a lot of those things are in there because of either past legal things, errors and omissions insurance, things like that were required all inspectors are required to put certain things in there. You can go above and beyond that, and those inspectors who are InterNACHI members, which most will be, because it's essentially it's where you get your continuing education for the cheapest buck. You pay them $400 a year, and you get all the continuing ed that you need. And in exchange for that, if you use their language in your report, you can put their little badges on your screen that don't really do anything. But all those things, so all kinds of different things have input as far as what makes it in the report and why. And a lot of that is just to try to be educational. Some of it is just to point out things for, like I said, for insurance companies or things like that. So when they're reading through it, an insurance company says, "Do you have galvanized pipes?" They can look in there. "Oh yeah, I do." All those different things make their way into there. Now, not everything that's in there, as I said before, is necessarily defective. Some of that stuff we point out simply to avoid future things. And even that doesn't work. Another example that we had, I took a call in spring. We did an inspection for this young lady in about August or September. It was late in the summer. And she called in spring and said she's got water in her basement. And I remembered her because I had a feeling this was going to come back. And I said, "Let me guess, it's on that front left corner." And she said, "Oh my gosh, it was. How did you remember that?" I said, "Did you ever seal the hole and fix the concrete?" And she said, "Well, no, I thought that could be something that was done maybe later. That's what my realtor said." The concrete was all pitched bad. Everything was sloping back towards the foundation. And there was literally a hole in her foundation wall that was stuffed with old aprons. So, not everybody's real bright. So unfortunately for inspection reports, we have to dumb things down to the lowest common denominator and put in a bunch of stuff that seems mundane or stupid or not relevant. And those things need to make it in there, because otherwise, they're based on things like frequency of calls on certain things. We get a lot of that. Different different requirements by different organizations, or like I said, departments require us to put certain language in there. If you're buying a house that's got eaves cladding, you're supposed to put a comment in there that those should be inspected with a certified eaves inspection on a periodic basis, things like that. And they're all due to different lawsuits essentially within the industry that have come back and put pressure on the E&O providers. And then the E&O providers, in order to keep or get your E&O coverage, you have to submit examples of your reports and your contract language to them. So a lot of those things make it into those because of that. So it's, I kind of chalk that up to the caliente and caution, hot, and whatever different languages on your McDonald's coffee cup because somebody spilled hot coffee in their lap and sued. It's all these little things that out of one lawsuit, we all now have to pay the price. So some of those things we don't like putting in there. I really don't think that a drip leg on a water heater that isn't 6 inches from the floor is a real safety hazard, because most people don't let little children play at the base of their water heater. But nevertheless, somebody somewhere got blasted by one, and now we all have to put that in as a safety concern. And it's a $3.50 piece that you can get at the Home Depot in the water heater aisle and screw it in yourself. So some of these things are really dumb. We don't like putting them in. You guys don't like reading them, and I'm sure you don't like having to deal with not real bright clients trying to say, "Well, I want that replaced. I want this done," or I want my house new.
Like Gorilla Glue?
What's
Sorry.
that?
Gorilla Glue comes to mind.
Gorilla Glue, yes. And we see a lot of that stuff on inspections. Sometimes that stuff works. So I tell you, we did a sump pump. It was half of a culvert. It was a true, for those who remember MacGyver, it was a true MacGyver. It was half of a culvert, 2 C-clamps, 3 coat hangers, duct tape, and both pumps worked, and they were going through a garden hose. So yeah, people will do a lot of stuff on their own. So, but yeah, Gorilla Glue comes to mind.
Just
So,
don't put it in your hair.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions on that kind of stuff? Why stuff makes reports or any of that kind of stuff? Too much stuff in reports. Everybody's got horror stories and hatred towards inspection reports. I know. Believe me, I have some too. I've read some of my competitors' reports, and I don't even know how they operate. But and I'm sure some people have issue with mine, but we try to keep it pretty clean. So, all right. Anybody have any other questions on anything or want to comment on stuff at all? I've been kind of
Ian,
talking.
I got a question.
Yeah.
What is one thing that realtors do that drive you nuts?
One thing that realtors do that drives
Per
me
se,
nuts.
gotta be something.
Honestly, the biggest thing is when they don't kind of educate their buyers as to what the home inspection process is. Setting those expectations goes a long way to making that transaction go smooth. Um, most of the little stuff that realtors do isn't all that big of a deal. And actually lately for the last year or so since COVID, we hardly see a lot of them, but setting those expectations, that's huge. I know one realtor who he literally takes a bad inspection report and he gives it to the buyer and says, this is, and then he uses us on the vast majority, and then he gives them one of ours and shows the difference. Setting those expectations, especially for people who are buying some of these, I mean, we've all seen them. You guys see them. It's what people are being reduced to, and we're seeing that trend. So, the vast majority of homes that we're doing now are essentially what's left over, right? So it's like when you're a kid, it's like the last kid in line is the weakest and the strongest in the Red Rover game because you can't, we're getting that in inspections. This is the house that nobody wanted, which is why they got their offer accepted, and they're not looking good. So setting those expectations for buyers when they go into things is huge, especially if you are getting into that waiving the inspection game. Another one that we did, he was the seller, and he threatened that he was going to light us up on social media and say all this stuff about us because he was just mad. His big beef, he claimed, was the patio, but it was because he didn't know that the entire house he bought was filled with asbestos. And when I say filled, I mean filled. So he had vermiculite in his attic. The siding was asbestos. The shingles were asbestos. The pipe insulation was asbestos, and he had 9x9 floor tiles throughout the basement, every closet, and in the little landing on the stairways. So he didn't know that when he bought it because he bought it without an inspection, and the realtor didn't set any kind of expectations for him. And so when we came through, we said, this is it. Now, this is a house that was probably, I think when he bought it, couldn't have been more than probably 135. And he was trying to sell this thing for 190, and he was going to make a quick buck because he redid the bathroom. He's mad because now he's stuck with this thing, but nobody told him it was asbestos. He had no idea. He called me on the phone and was chewing me out and reading me the riot act, and he didn't know. So setting those expectations is probably the biggest thing I would say with realtors that you guys can do.
Hey, Ian.
We always know when they're not. And
Ian.
when they're not, it's like my guy I had yesterday. He wasn't focused at all he had a mirrored stair step down to a corner with a horizontal running all the way down that went a stair step down to the other corner. It looked like the footing sank because the floor was all cracked. And he was more concerned with the 4-inch piece of wood trim next to the front door that was popped out a little bit, that I showed him you could just push it right back in and away you go. But his expectations were clearly not where they needed to be. So that would probably be the biggest
Hey,
thing.
Ian, when you say that though, I'm a new agent and I'm not really sure what you mean. I mean, so give me an example of what you should say.
On setting those expectations, let them know what a home inspection is and what it isn't. A home inspection is not a warranty. It is not. We're just there to find the big stuff, or at least we're supposed to be. There are other inspectors who really pride themselves on putting little notches in their belt for every little thing that they can come across. It's supposed to be for the big stuff, safety hazards, material defects, things like that. The rest of the stuff is somewhat educational. While, like I mentioned, some of those things could be forward-looking costs if you're operating with older systems or things like that. But so when they come in and they're more concerned that blinds don't work right, or that the carpet is stained, or that there's a hole in the drywall, you can have 18 holes in there. I raised 4 boys. Every wall in my house had damage on it, and some of them was probably for me. It's those things don't matter. They really don't matter in a home inspection. It's cosmetic, and a lot of people don't understand that. Even when you have a potted plant next to a bay window that somebody overflowed, and now that hardwood floor is damaged. It's damaged. Yes. Is it defective? No. A great example of that, which is, I'm kind of curious to see where some of this new defect language comes from, or leads to is windows. You know, every buyer wants new windows. Defective thermal seals. So is it defective? Sure, it's a thermal seal and it's not working right. It's defective. That's literally what the terminology is, or even broken thermal seal. But the window itself is still functional. So it still opens, it still closes, and it still locks. Technically, from an ASHI standpoint, that's a functioning window with a defective thermal seal. So, you know, can you get a seal replaced? Sure. Is the seller going to do it for you so it looks pretty and new? Probably not. So some of those things are setting some of those expectations early helps in that process. And as a new realtor, I would encourage you to go on as many inspections as you can. If your inspector doesn't want you there, there's a problem with that. We gladly welcome realtors, buyers, whoever wants to be there, mom, dad, depending on your family and the demographics or the country in which you come. You may get 16 cousins and uncles too that show up. I really wanted to bring beer and brats on one because there was, no joke, 16 people in a 1,200-foot house, but it was their first house and the whole family showed up for it. So they had a big family on both sides. But go if you're a new realtor, go on inspections and find out what, you know, why things are the way that they are. You know, everybody has continuing education requirements in the industry. You guys do too, but they don't always overlap. I would love to know more about what goes on in your guys' world when you're working with clients. And, you know, we don't always get to see that secondary component of what happens, you know, after our inspection report is delivered. You know, just like you guys don't always get to know some of the stuff of why it's in our stuff, but know why galvanized pipes are a big deal. It's because it, at one point in time, it was a great pipe, one of the longest plumbing systems around in terms of longevity. But at this day and age, most of them are near the end of their life and they're kind of calcified on the inside and they can restrict water flow and things like that. And they're prone to leaks. I mean, today we think steel and water don't mix, but back then it was wartime and copper was in short supply and steel was plentiful. So, you know, there's all different kinds of things that you can kind of educate buyers on that new buyer front on what to look out for in some of these homes that you're showing, and what's really important and what isn't. And so that helps in that regard. And it happens, you know, like I said, we'd love to know more about what happens in your side, but instead the real world scenario that we get probably 70% of the time, and I don't even know if you guys are aware of it, is we'll have repeat clients, some 2, some 3. Our longest holding record streak is 5 inspections. They're using different realtors oftentimes because they feel like maybe you guys didn't guide them in the right way, or you didn't have their best interests in mind. And then we see them somewhere else and I say, oh, okay, are you working with Sarah again? No, I'm working with Steve. Oh, okay. And where is Steve? So that happens a lot. And I can only presume that it's because they felt like maybe their needs weren't either being met or you didn't have their ideas in line or weren't on the same page as them. So setting that expectation of what they're about to get into, what that inspection report looks like, go ahead and tell them there's going to be a whole lot of stuff in there that doesn't mean anything and it doesn't have to be fixed, because that's the reality. We have to put some of that stuff in there. We have to be that person. You know, our job is literally to come in and poke a big pin in their big balloon of a dream and say, that's great that you really want this place. Here's everything that's wrong. We actually can't come in and say, you should buy this. I think this is great. We can't. I'd love to. Just like I'd love to tell some of these people, this is not the house for you. There's no way you guys are going to do all this work that this house needs. We can't do that. We have to stay in our lane. And that other component is your lane. So setting those expectations, letting them know, you guys know your clients best. I mean, we recognize the very small little piece that we play in this puzzle. And we, as much as we protect our brand and we're, very cautious of that and our reputation, we understand what you guys put in. This is the 15th or the 20th home that you've gone through. And in late times, you know, this is the 25th offer that you've written and your first acceptance. You know, I mean, we have seasoned agents who do 6 and 7 million a month who are down to, you know, who used to do 4 or 5 inspections a month, we're down to 1 or maybe 2. So, I mean, it's happening everywhere, but let them know what they're getting into, and work with them on that. And that will set that stage for making the rest of that transaction go a lot smoother.
Do you have any videos on YouTube?
Do we have any videos?
Yeah.
No, not really. I'm in a few. I know people have taken some of us on inspection and posted them. So there is some of that out there. We're
Okay,
happy
cool.
if people want to do that. I know one particular agent in the area actively kind of markets his stuff on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel, and he brought a camera crew around and followed us around on, I don't know, 4 or 5 different inspections and kind of cobbled the clips together. So I know we're out there, but we don't have our own stuff now.
Thank
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Everybody's got a horror story for inspectors, no? All right. Well, that's pretty much all I had. You know, it's a tough market right now, no doubt about it. You don't need me to tell you. I'll say it anyway. Just watch that liability side. You know, the waiving the inspection is a nightmare. It really is. I've only had 2 that have been halfway decent, and one of the 2 was bought by a relo company and resold, so they were fairly comfortable in going into it with that. And another one, it was a family friend, and they weren't in it all that long. So, but they usually end in tears, and you know, there's just no recourse for these people. And with the market being the way that it is, you know, I guarantee you that house that I just did with the horizontal crack and the bad footing, they were aware of that because there was previous repairs around there, but they never put it on their disclosure. And now that deal's kind of in limbo. But I'm sure somebody will step in and buy it because they won't care. So, you know, watch that liability side best you can. If your office has those waivers, I would get them signed because 95% of these things are coming back not real good when we're out on these post closes. So, sign of the times, I guess. Anything else?
This
All right.
was, thank
What's that?
you. It was very informative.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. You know, we're happy to do it. I'm happy to take any other questions. I think when you sent that stuff around, my contact info was on there. We're based in Cedarburg, so I'm local in the area. We do get everywhere. We're north of Sheboygan, west darn near to Madison, out past Delafield and Johnson's Creek, and all the way down to Racine, Kenosha. So we get everywhere, but I am based right here in Ozaukee County. So
How big is your team?
What's that?
How big is your team?
We have 2 teams. So I didn't even talk about that. So real self-promotion quick. We're different than other inspection companies out there. We always go out as a team. So you always get at least 2 of us. If a house is bigger, we send more people. That doesn't cost your client any more money. It's just the way that we operate. So what you guys love about that is we get your inspection times down to about an hour and a half. So we're in, we're out, and we're done. We don't rush the client. It's just we can, with 2 people on the job or sometimes 3, we just move through the home a little bit faster. But we still, you know, we tell everybody budget for 2 hours, but that's usually more than adequate time to answer client questions, show them. We still do walkthroughs with clients and things like that. Like I said before, we encourage you guys to be there. We encourage clients to be there. We don't dissuade that at all. It never did, actually, even during the COVID stuff. It's a big decision. So, but we basically run two separate teams. Not always, but sometimes. So we just have 2 teams. So there's 4 inspectors. We have back office staff and people who work on the. Katie does sales and marketing. Nina answers phones. So we have a few other people in the company. But as far as inspectors go, we just really run the two teams. But that we do offer 48-hour booking. Just the way that our schedule runs, we have flexible scheduling. So we generally run an 8, an 11, and a 2 p.m. Every day. Saturdays we have usually an 8 and 11. In the busier times, so like the summer times last year, we were also putting a 5 p.m. on, and we were running that, and we had 3 a day on Saturdays, and we still struggle to keep up. So we hired more people this year, but we do this year we'll do probably about we average about 100 to 120 inspections a month.
Was that a GSD I saw on the back?
What's that?
Was that a German Shepherd?
I have 2 of them. Yeah. So if they made a cameo appearance, yes, there's two of them.
That's the best dog in the world. I've got one.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of them roaming around here. So one of
I
them
have
is
one too.
far more.
Michelle, I want to meet your dog.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
Thanks. It's been real helpful.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jared, for the invite, and Aaron and Dana. Appreciate it. And if you guys do have any questions or want to ask something off grid, don't be afraid. Shoot me an email or give a phone call. Happy to help out with particulars. Even if you're the one who calls and says, I do get them all the time. These people are asking for this. Do I really have to concede to this? Is this required? And generally they're not. It's just overbearing or alarmist inspectors out there who are making big claims about how everything's going to fail. So they exist. We try not to be that. We try to be fair and balanced. You'll hear it from everybody that they want to be non-alarmist, but unfortunately, many people are. So that's all I got.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
You.
Now we got to go out and write some offers with home inspections.
Right on.
Yeah, try anyway, but good luck on that one. I don't know. It's not going well in that avenue. So
I'm still writing them. So radon, no.
Yeah.
But yeah.
If you ever do have that, I mean, one of the things that we've done for the realtors that we work with is if you have your favorite inspector, and everybody does, so that's we understand that it's about building relationships. Ask them. One of the things that we do on some of these things, if somebody had to nix it, radon's really important, or they have a new baby and they were going to turn that basement into a playroom or whatever. We offer discounts to people to come back out for that kind of stuff, to do it after the fact or post close, so that they have that knowledge. I would hope most inspectors would do that. It's something that a lot of these things are important to some of these buyers, and so when we're coming through, or even on these post close inspections, then they can really open up the floodgates. So, that's something that Wisconsin doesn't do. Other parts of the country, it's buyer's choice. So if they want to do mold, and they want to do a super scope, and they want to do radon, and they want to do pest, they want to do all these things, they can. It's not up to the seller, it's up to the buyer. Not so here in Wisconsin. So some of those things, we probably, I back out way more mold tests than we actually perform, because they're never in the contract, and buyers are confused. So especially when they go on our online scheduler and they're like, ooh, I want radon, I want mold, I want pest, and I'm happy to take the money, if I could, but the ethical part of me says, look, I will tell you if we see evidence of mold. And even then, paying me to tell you that it is actually mold is stupid, because you're going to have to pay somebody to get rid of it anyway. So you might as well keep your money and invest in a new microwave or something. But so some of those things, ask your inspector. We do it for the people that we work with. So if your clients are having to forego a lot of these things, putting them on the back end once they're in the home, just to give them that peace of mind, we do that at a discount for them. So in this kind of market, you got to try to make them feel good where you can.
Yeah, I like that.
On that pest front, just so you know, we one of the things too, we do those pest inspections free of charge for vets. It's just one way that we can say thanks. I get it that they're not supposed to pay for it, but that takes that onus off of trying to get the selling side to pay for it or a family member for paying for it. So it just makes that transaction easier. We come in, we do it all in-house. Everything that we do is in-house, even our lab services. So we do those free of charge for VA loans for vets. If you're a listing agent and your guy who's inspecting your property or whoever, if they don't do it, quite honestly, there's not many of us who do our own pest inspections. Most inspectors don't. I know one other pretty decent outfit in the area, big wise. He does them. He'll tell you he's the only inspection company that does them. He's not. But if you're on the listing side and you don't have anybody do that, feel free to give us a call. We do them as standalone for about 50%, 60% of what your standard Terminex or whoever we'll call. We'll do a pest inspection for $175 if it's a standalone inspection. Typically, I think Terminex is right around $420, $400, and that's for about 1,500-ish feet. So we can save a substantial amount of money if that particular test does happen to fall on your seller to try to get that deal to go through. So we're happy to do that for you too. And I know that we work with a handful of you guys that are on this call for that. So. Yeah, other than that, I don't know. That's it. Hopefully some homes hit the market here and alleviates this bottleneck a little bit, but we'll see.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That was great.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks. Have a good day. Enjoy the weekend. It's supposed to be nice and warm on what, Sunday? I think we're supposed to hit 50.
I think so.
Hope so. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the invite, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian.
Hope to see you in person soon.